All right, so I want to set the stage today, and I'm going to just do a quick, brief overview of the 20th century in fashion to kind of set the stage for where we are in this moment of time that created the thoughtful launch of a company like SmartGlamour. Hopefully this is new information for a lot of you. I'm not going to go too in depth in any specific decade, but just kind of fly through where we are and how we got to 2024 and the things that are influencing our fashion decisions today. People who were in my class know that last week we talked about the state of fashion 2023 and how 2024 just came out. It's going to be our midterm in this class. For those of you who don't know about McKinsey's report, State of Fashion, it comes out every single year in November, and it's a really great resource for you to see what's going on in the industry. Completely free on the internet, and I highly recommend you check it out. So we'll touch on how this all relates back to the big pieces we talked about that are influencing state of fashion today. So leading up to the 20th century, coming out of the Civil War in the United States and all the different class upheavals, a lot of things started to change in the way that people were dressing. For the first time ever, the Industrial Revolution happened, and there was the ability to make clothes fast and outside the home. So people traditionally, up until this point in time, were really making clothing inside the home, tailored to fit them, specific to their needs, but not extremely focused on, especially in the mainstream classes, is focused on fashion and what everyone else was wearing to look like everyone else. It was a little bit more utilitarian, what people were making inside their homes. It was by the end of the 19th century that people really started to buy their clothing from manufacturers outside the home, because it was actually possible for the first time that fabric could be made in really fast ways and put together outside of a traditional tailor. So as we enter into the 19th century, we see different types of influences coming in and out. And throughout the 20th century, you will see that, and you will probably remember or know from other classes or other influences that you've had in your life, that each decade is really kind of marked by different changes that happened in the specific decade. People that influenced it, events, whether it was a world war or the Depression or otherwise, and it really influenced what was being worn by people at the time. I also mention all of these tidbits as a prelude to talking about some of our sustainable guests that we'll have coming in later on in the semester. It's all kind of tied in with each other, that these social influences started to make it so that fashion is being worn fast and not as thoughtfully as it maybe had been in the past. And to the point of our guest today, who is really thinking about size inclusivity, there has been an absence of thinking about that throughout the last 100 years. It's like one size fits all model that kind of snowballed as the century moved on. So looking specifically at the first 10 years of the 1900s, we had a lot of immigrants pouring into the United States. This really created this huge divide between rich and poor, and women started working for the first time. We also saw bicycling have an uptick, which meant that pants came into fashion for women, a little bit more underneath, petticoats and things underneath their what they were wearing. And moving through the 1910s, the First World War happened. So some big trends were that there were shortages on clothing, and so that meant dyes and making fashions a little bit more monotone throughout, and not as much color as maybe had been possible 10 years before. The volumes really shrunk because of shortages. So you kind of see the hemlines go in, everything's a little bit former-fitting, and you can even see it here in the picture throughout the course of the decade, starting in 1910, a little bit fuller and shrinking in size as the decade went on, and then after the war, maybe increasing a little bit more in volume. But what came into the 1920s, everyone is very familiar with the Roaring Twenties, the typical flapper girl. Everything in fashion is very cyclical, and things tend to die in excess. So this is kind of a moment where everything kind of got dramatic, and women's hair, was chopped off in a very different way than it was in the past. There was prohibition, a lot of dancing and free-form movement led to kind of the it girls wearing more free-flowing clothing. And maybe a little bit more masculine in fit than in the past. It didn't really show off her curves the same way that it used to in the start of the 20th century. And it was a very prosperous decade, a lot of money flowing through people's pocketbooks, which meant that fashion was moving really fast. People could afford to buy more things and get rid of things. And then with the stock market crash in 1929, that was a really big influence that led to a dramatic shift in apparel in the 1930s. Kind of Dynamics of Fashion is the chapter that I'm sort of summarizing here pretty fast. It's the first chapter of their book, one of the resources that I put into the syllabus this semester. And one of the things that they call the 1930s is making do. People really did not make extravagant purchases on fashion. So there's not a lot of fashion change that you see in this decade. It's a little bit more humdrum and drab. A new frugality, how do you say that word? Frugalness, frugality, influenced people's decision-making throughout this decade. So if you could mend your garments, you probably would and not be doing as much shopping as in the past. Some big influences were King Edward VII and Wallis Simpson and their great love affair, I think influencing the way that people dressed throughout this decade. Overall, hemlines lengthened, and the overall look was a lot more softer and feminine than it had been in the 1920s. The waistline returned, belts grew in popularity, and two-way stretch undergarments were born for the first time, which has been very much to the pleasantness of all of us women since then. A lot more comfortable wear versus the hard-boned corsets before, because nylon was invented. Again, this is a precursor as we start to talk about sustainability and what nylon has then meant for the entire industry when everything has stretch all the time and it doesn't biodegrade. But at the same time, this did create a really great freedom for women and their undergarments in the 30s. So just thinking about the decades here, we're talking about a pretty feminine look throughout the 1900s into 1910s. We get a little bit more masculine for the 1920s, 1930s, the fashions change again. So kind of this back and forth reason to be shopping, a lot more people getting out there and switching out what they're wearing in a way that, really didn't exist before the 20th century, this dramatic shift 10 years at a time. Because of the Depression, there were fewer trips to Europe from the U.S. So the U.S. designers kind of emerged for the first time, some more fashion houses here in America. And then in the 1940s, that actually expanded. There was a lot less opportunity during the World War II to get overseas or to have influence from these European designers. So in the United States, we saw a lot of popping up of new faces and influences. There was also a really big relocation in the 1940s from the West Coast to California. Hollywood glamour really picking up in esteem and influence. There was also a big return to family values focus for the second half of the 40s. And as we walk into the 1950s, that leads to a very, very uniform sense of dressing for women's wear. There was a mandate put out by certain fashion magazines on what to wear during the 1950s. The look was very much laid out and stated for women. Right down to what kind of makeup you should be wearing. So it is kind of a very interesting moment in time, thinking from the 1950s to how we got here to 2024, where everyone is looking for their own self-expression and trying to find the place that suits them and the image that they want to get across with their clothing. I know I'm going fast. I just kind of wanted to give you all a broad, overarching overview. As I mentioned with the 1920s, things do go from something that's very conservative to oftentimes a big pendulum swing the other way. The 1960s was a big moment of turmoil in art and music. They call it the Youthquake, which is a period of a lot of protests and chaos. And in that, there was technological advances in many fields, the birth control pill came out for the first time. Landing on the moon happened. So all of these things kind of influenced the way that people were dressing. When you think of the 60s, you think of a lot of bright colors. You think of shrinking of hemlines, particularly looking at the 1950s, going from this uniform stay-at-home mom outfit that was kind of mandated by all the fashion magazines to now all the young girls wearing mini skirts and fun, flashy outfits. Baby doll dresses came out. Bell-bottom pants had a really big moment in the 1960s for the first time in women's wear. And modern fashion marketing was born in this decade, which is obviously a really big influence on the way that women thought they were supposed to look and feel and dress and be shaped. So, thinking about how the marketing started to influence all of the decisions that shoppers were having, consumers were having throughout the last part of the 20th century leads to the moment of big change that we're facing now in the 21st. I call the 1970s the me decade. Women and minorities are fighting for equal rights kind of everywhere in the United States. There's a lot of Vietnam anti-war sentiment happening. But the fashion trends and development that come out of this decade are really this kind of anything goes attitude. Hippie style is, I think, probably the most synonymous term when you think of 70s dressing. Skirt lengths really vary, and women start wearing pants in a bigger way for the first time. So the mini and the maxi and the midi skirts are all having a really big moment alongside of pants. And then denim and designer jeans take off as a big trend. Looking into the 1980s, this is a moment that marketing really explodes in women's wear. And I think, the supermodel kind of comes into the 90s being born. So the idea of what a woman is supposed to look like and to wear her designer clothing is kind of everywhere and a bit ubiquitous in all of the marketing and messaging that is coming out of the 80s. It's also the first time when we talk about children's wear in a few weeks, it's the first time that kids are getting marketed to for the first time on what they should be wanting to buy for not only clothing, but toys and things like that, as kids' TV shows really pop up in a big way. So we call this the era of the yuppie. A lot of advancements in technologies, computers, VCRs, a lot more working women, leading to some changes in the way that women are dressing, and the power suit for a woman. Shoulder pads, this is absolutely a period of a lot of excess, big hair, big shoulders, big belts, big earrings, big everything, coming out of the 80s. And then we turn the corner into the 90s, where a lot of different micro groups of trends kind of pop up. So we kind of have the slackers and the grunge, the big casualization of shopping and denim taking over sweatshirts, lots of branding on things everywhere throughout the 90s. Layering is a big moment. Flannels as outerwear kind of takes off. Doc Marten boots and your slip dresses with a flannel over it. Stretch fabrics also continue to grow. And then we have the rise of big mall brands like Gap, Banana Republic, J. Crew. So in the 90s, the idea of kind of something that sort of started in the 60s and grew into the 90s is the idea that there's kind of trend groups. You can pick your identity of how you want to be dressing based on the group that you identify with, and you can find yourself in that spot. When you think back to the way everyone was dressing in the 50s, it was completely uniform. Fashion magazines were all telling you had to dress the same way. We're starting to feel a shift away from that as we move through the decade. And here we are, today in the 21st century. My very quick flyover view of the 20th century is all to set the stage for the fact that we're here now in 2024 where everyone is asking for things that include their specific body type. They don't want to just look like the supermodels of the 90s and be wearing what fashion magazines tell them that they have to wear. There needs to be more to that. There needs to be the opportunity for all to dress the way they want to dress and have a little bit more freedom in it and see people on TV that look like them and are shaped like them. which leads to my introduction of our guest today. I'm sorry, one more note I wanted to touch on also, and Mallory will be talking about this a bit too. So I think that her brand being born out of the idea for inclusivity in fashion, but also that ranges from in styling as well as and shape and fit, as well as costing and pricing. And I think when we look back on my summary of the State of Fashion 2023 from last week, the one big consumer shift that was discussed for the year was the two-track spending and how some people were going to be thinking about different ways to be spending their dollars in a smarter, more economical way. While some people could still afford that luxury moment, the great majority of the middle class would be making these choices and thinking about what fashion actually costs them. So with that, let me introduce my guest for today. Mallorie Dunn is a New York City-based fashion designer, owner, and professor. After graduating from FIT and Pratt Institute, she worked in corporate design before deciding to switch to life of freelance work. Through the freedom of a freelance schedule allows her, she was able to launch her line, SmartGlamour, in spring 2014. She's also an adjunct professor here at Parsons Open Campus and at the New School, and teaches virtual sewing, design, and sketching courses as well. SmartGlamour morphed into what it is today after many discussions about body image issues and the lack of accurate representation of women, femmes, and non-binary folks in the media. Always having the desire to make clothes, Mallorie found her real passion behind the designs when she realized she could help people with her garments. She's excited as SmartGlamour continues to grow into an even more fully realized movement of body liberation and community for women, femme presenting and identifying individuals, and non-binary folks. Mallorie considers herself to be a teacher, designer, and artist. She is constantly searching for new ways to express herself, better herself, and help others. SmartGlamour is a culmination of all of these things, and thank you so much for being here to share your story with us. To just switch screens for her. Okay. Great. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to folks who are in my classes and also folks who are not. So, as Professor Gordon just said, I'm Mallorie Dunn. I'm a professor, but I'm also the owner and designer of SmartGlamour. And before I jump into just this little, I'll close that.
Ugly thing, yeah. What is it?
I think it just clicked, yeah. There we go. Okay, so before I jump into just a quick brief overview of what SmartGlamour really is, I want to play a quick audio piece that I actually curated to play at the beginning of a fashion show of ours back in 2018. So I basically put out a call for what do you think of when you think of fashion, and people recorded themselves answering, and then I arranged their answers.
What do you think of when you think of fashion?
Inaccessible.
Unattainable for most.
Unattainable. Out of reach.
Out of reach.
Out of touch.
Exclusive.
Expensive. Segregated.
Apart.
Non-welcoming.
Cutthroat.
Ugly. Selective.
Fads.
Class. Bulky clothing.
Rules.
Status. Time. History. Plus size.
Skinny.
Tiny. Form-fitting. Too form-fitting. Straight-size women.
Size 0 to 2. 5 feet 8 inches tall.
Privilege.
Industry. Marketing. Trends.
Mainstream. International. High-end couture.
Exorbitant. Out there. Fantasy.
Impractical. Illusion.
Vogue.
Models. Magazines. Name brands. Runways.
Runway.
Catwalks.
Trend.
Trends. Glitz.
Sequins.
Fancy.
Glamour.
Glamorous.
Comfortable. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Beauty.
Art.
Fun. Movement. Colorful. Color.
Stylish, sexy,
Sexy.
fierce.
Creativity.
Powerful,
Attitude, the way of saying something
without saying anything at all.
Self-expression, self-affection.
Expression.
Expression.
Expression. There are no rules. Makes you feel amazing.
Freedom.
Everything.
Fashion is all of us.
So I wanted to just play that quickly to kind of give you a background look into how I approach fashion and think about fashion, and how I approach SmartGlamour. Because the reality is, I think people who are involved in fashion tend to think of fashion some way, in one specific way. And sometimes our customers and the majority of people who feel like they're not as involved in fashion think of fashion in another way. And sometimes that way can be hurtful, and sometimes that way can be hopeful. And so, you know, the main goal of SmartGlamour is to kind of shift that for people from something that may be hurtful to them, that has left them out, to something that welcomes them and empowers them. So just a very quick overview for me. So I've been designing and sewing clothing for 25 years. I've been working professionally as a fashion designer for over 14, and I've been a small business owner for 10. The main three tenets of SmartGlamour are accessibility, sustainability, and inclusivity. And this is a quote that I pulled from an interview of mine, where I was basically stressing the best things about having specifically a small business, which is, I'm a small business. I can do what I want and what I care about and what I'm dedicated to. And what I want and I'm dedicated to is making clothing equally accessible for all bodies.
When a person sees a SmartGlamour model who does not fit in with the normalized ideals beauty, and to see that person confident, happy, beautiful, I think just the image of that chips away at the self-imposed limitations that people put on themselves.
I'm a 5'2" Hispanic Mexican American woman. Like, not many people are looking for my type in SmartGlamour way. So there's definitely not many places that welcome people like myself. So SmartGlamour makes me feel like I belong.
Let's see if I can pause.
When a person sees
There we go. So that was a quick clip from a mini documentary that was made about my brand in 2017. You can find it on YouTube if you want to watch the whole thing. It's called SmartGlamour Beyond Fashion. And from here on out, you'll see a few more clips, information about us, things that we've done, and also just the impact that that's had directly on our models and our customers and people that follow us, because that's really the most important thing about the brand. So this is just a little quick slide video from one of our runway shows, just to show you that we've produced 14 fully inclusive revolutionary runway shows, 50 collections, and 13 pop-up shops and trunk shows, including one 3-month-long shop in New York City's East Village. So this video clip is very short. It's just from our 2016 spring show that was covered by Mick, which is what this video footage is from. So we opened our runway shows to anyone who wanted to attend, which meant most of the time they were sold out with standing room, and amazing. Really wonderful experiences. This is a quick slide about a feature that we had on our website called the Model Directory, or also known as Shop by Model. Where the models that worked with me the most, I would take them, in small groups and do a photo shoot where they're all wearing the exact same dress. I would make that dress custom fit to them, which is normal for SmartGlamour. And then they would each have their own page that would have their measurements, what size they are in SmartGlamour, what customizations they utilize, because SmartGlamour is a customizable brand. So if a shopper may relate to one of these models, either by height or by size, or maybe even just their general vibe, they could go through this directory, click through to that model, learn about them, and then also have direct links to everything that they wore throughout the site. And then over here on the left is just some TikTok comments about how people feel about that. A lot of people saying, this is a genius feature, this is brilliant, seeing people that look like me, what an excellent idea, etc. So it really resonates with people. Then things that we did a lot were these very specifically message-based campaigns. This is one that went viral in January of 2016 called I'm Flattered. And I think I muted this, so I'll talk while the video plays. Yes. So basically, the concept behind this campaign was that often when we hear the word flattering in fashion, we think, oh, it makes you look smaller, it makes you look thinner. And the actual definition of flattering is to please yourself. So I wanted to take that back and bring back the original definition of flattering. So I asked for folks who felt like they had been told by people they know, or strangers maybe even, that they shouldn't wear certain types of things. And then I made them those things. We did a photo shoot. I took some quotes from everybody about how it made them feel. And it got covered by publicity all around the world. And then these are some examples of some press that SmartGlamour has gotten over the years. Teen Vogue about our runway show, Upworthy and Bustle from our runway shows, PBS from our runway shows, and then just being included in different listicles and articles by online publications who are talking about fit or manufacturing plus size clothing, and just the concept of inclusivity being kind of like a trend. And then I was also featured by Oxygen and by Upworthy with these digital shorts. So the Oxygen one actually was a really cool initiative that they did for a full year. They interviewed female small business owners, and they featured a different women small business owner every week for 52 weeks. So this was mine, and it was like a 1-minute commercial that was live on the Oxygen TV channel, but then also on YouTube and on their online platforms. And that's it. So now we can dive deeper into it.
Awesome, thank you. That's great.
Do you want me to like maybe go back to the beginning?
Yeah, right here. Why don't we go back to, yeah, perfect.
We'll just leave it there.
I don't want to see in your eyes. 10 years, congratulations.
Thank
But that's
you.
no small feat.
Yeah.
To make it 10 years with any business. So.
Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about your path before becoming a business owner, and you know, then how you landed on the idea to
Yeah,
launch
sure.
this.
So basically, I've been interested in fashion and clothes my whole life. I've been the person that, like, even when I was little and I didn't remember who somebody was, my mom would be like, oh, she was wearing the red sweater. I'm like, oh, okay, great. I know who you're talking about. But I never really thought of that as a career path. I didn't know that it was a job, you know, and I actually thought I'd be a math teacher because I'm very good at math. And then when I got to high school, my high school had a fashion program. We were a Title I school, which means that we're in a poorer community, so we get some government funding, which means we had a lot of really great programs. So I was like, whoa, this is a thing that you can do, and I dove into it. I loved it. It was like, I'm switching trajectories, studying this for college. Ended up going here. I just did my associates here, so 2 years here. And it was really, I don't know, it was a mixed bag, right? Because I loved everything that I was learning to do. I love making clothes, I love sewing, I love draping, I love drawing, I love designing, all of that. But at the same time, I think I was finding out the realities of the fashion industry itself. And also just the realities of, like, you know, I'm a young adult and I'm like living by myself for the first time, and I'm finding out how people treat people. And I'm not loving what I'm finding out. So, I was like, well, maybe I'll get a teaching degree and I'll try to do something and like combine the two. So I transferred to Pratt and I got an art and design education degree and really loved that. But that degree is very much geared towards becoming a like fine art public school teacher, which I didn't want to do. So I was like, all right, well, let me try this corporate fashion thing and see if it's something I may like. So I decided on the junior sector because I thought it would be fun. Juniors, if you don't know, is for basically like teens, tweens, young adults. It is what it's called a crossover customer because since a lot of juniors is lower priced, they're very aware that also adult women purchase juniors clothing. So we do keep that in mind when we're designing. So I worked for a design house that makes clothes for like Walmart, Kmart, Wet Seal, JCPenney, Ross, Burlington, etc. And unfortunately learned that a lot of things that I thought were true. That there's not a lot of creativity happening. It's a very high stress. We are, producing things in unethical ways and taking advantage of people in other countries. and mass producing and overproducing and a lot of things that I don't care for. So
But there's a lot of math and all of that.
well, math comes in for tech design.
Yeah.
So I got hired originally as an assistant designer, and then I became an associate designer, which was sketching and emailing and all of that, sitting in sometimes sitting in on fits. And then through that, my bosses learned that I actually knew how to sew and make clothes, because there's a lot of folks who end up in the fashion industry who are kind of more on the art side and don't know the actual building side. And so then they started throwing me tech design work. Of course, not paying me for that. But I am glad that I did it, because I have the experience of what technical design is, which is very helpful. But yeah, so then I switched to freelance. And through freelance, I did everything that I knew how to do. So I taught people things. I made custom pieces. I did alterations. I worked at a skate shop as a seamstress. I worked as a tailor for a private high-end shopping experience. Like, you name it, I did it. And it was during that time that I came up with the idea for SmartGlamour, through having all these conversations with all these different types of people that I was meeting, and just observing how badly people talk about their bodies.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the idea was born out of it, but you also got kind of a crash course on being a CEO, because you got to try all these different freelance jobs
Yes.
throughout,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah,
this time. And someone else was paying you. You didn't
yeah,
have to
like
pay
it's
yourself.
like while it was happening, I was like, oh, all of this is stressful, and I don't know if I really love it. But looking back on it, I'm like, I'm so grateful that I did so many like different types of fashion work, because now I have that experience. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm talking with my students about what types of speakers we have in this semester. People want this topic and this topic. I'm like, well, when you talk to a founder, they've got all the topics. They've had to think about every single thing, especially for a brand that's made it 10 years in. You've had to think about all the marketing and all the buying and everything, every step along the way.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Before we move more into SmartGlamour, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about your time here at FIT.
Yeah.
So if you had a chance to talk to yourself as a young graduate, is there any advice that you'd be giving yourself today?
I guess I would just tell myself that, like, because prior to coming to FIT, in my like high school brain, I thought like, oh, you just learn how to make things and then you go sell them. And then I felt like I couldn't do that. Like, I felt like I had to be a part of an industry that most of what it was doing I didn't like. And I think I would tell myself, like, right then and there, like, no, you don't have to do that. Like, you can decide. I mean, it's hard, don't get me wrong, but you can decide to like go your own way and do your own thing. And you don't have to follow every path that like other people put in front of you.
Yeah, that's great. Did you feel like you had like a can't miss experience while you were here? A class or an activity?
I mean, honestly, I have to say that one of my favorite activities that I remember so vividly, and I'm so happy that I just got to bring my students to do it, was going to the study rooms of the museum. So I'm currently teaching, obviously, some folks in my class, Materials and Construction 2, which is a second semester sewing. And it's a lot about fabrics and finishes. And so we get to go to the study room, and they pull garments directly from the museum.
That's awesome.
And you get to touch them and look at the inside. And like, that is so, so cool.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking how cool it was when I was a student. So now it's like double cool to do it again.
Yeah, that's great. And what do you feel like is the most important thing you learned while teaching here? Or since teaching here?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think like what. I don't know if it's like an actual like tangible thing that I learned, but what I will say is that after like working in the industry for a significant amount of time, and also like quite honestly working for yourself for a long time, you're kind of like in your own space doing your own thing, and you're not around as many people anymore. And being around students who are new to fashion design, newer to fashion design, and who are seeing some of these things for the first time and learning things for the first time, and like are full of all this like really creative energy, it gives me creative energy. So like that's a really wonderful part about teaching, is that like it kind of revitalizes you, you know, at the same time for the content that you're teaching.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you talked about the why of launching your own company. How about the how? How did you get started?
So SmartGlamour is entirely self-funded, meaning that like while I have raised small pockets of money, it's never been from, you know, a board of directors or even from like a big bank, right? It's all been small donations from like friends and family. So when I came up with the idea, actually the first thing that I did is I gathered a few of my friends who all do completely different things. I think only one of them is actually in fashion. Everyone does different things. And I invited them to a dinner where I told them my idea. And I was like, what do you think? Do you have feedback? Do you have questions? And we just had a big chat about it, which was super helpful. And then I launched an Indiegogo campaign. So that's like Kickstarter, but like Indiegogo's not as big anymore, but you know, like a GoFundMe, etc., to raise money. I raised $4,000, which is both a lot and not a lot, depending on where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And that was to create the first collection, build the website, and do a launch event, which was February 22nd, 2014.
Wow. Amazing. Oh, coming up.
Yeah, coming up.
Couple weeks. That's exciting. How did you find producers?
The producers are right here in my hands because the producers are me.
Yeah.
I make everything.
Wow. Still. Everything. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
It's great, and that's truly sustainable.
Yes. It's also, you know, the clothes are made to order, you know, because they are customizable, but they are also made to order because that is the most sustainable model, in my opinion, because you're not making anything that is not going to get sent to someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I actually have a slide. I teach a small business class for continuing ed, and I have a slide where I had pulled a picture from a journalist who was interviewing somebody at Zara, and it was a picture of inside their warehouse of just one item in one colorway, and it was like a rack that you can't even see the end. And I was like, this is what is happening at Zara before anyone purchases this dress. Here's what's at SmartGlamour before anyone purchases anything. It was just an empty box.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And for those of you that don't know, I'm on the Sustainability Council with Mallory, and that's how we were connected, and she's coming to speak here today. So obviously love the sustainability aspect of it, and love the fact that you know, one of the first things that they say with sustainability is think about the end at the beginning, and when you're designing and making a garment specifically for one person, you couldn't be more thinking about what's happening at the end of the life cycle of this product.
Right.
Versus, you know, maybe it ending up on a TJ Maxx rack, never getting bought, being burned, who knows?
Yeah, in a landfill.
Yeah, exactly. So the most sustainable business is definitely a small business that's, you know, cutting to order.
Yeah.
What would you say is your biggest piece of advice for someone who's thinking they want to start their own company?
I mean, I have a lot of like small little tidbits, like you must be really organized, you must be really driven, you should be a problem solver, right? Because you're in charge of everything. But my very big, like, general piece of advice is that you have got to be passionate about this choice. If it's just like, I don't know, like being an entrepreneur sounds fun and glamorous, like, don't do it. It is so much work and it's really hard. So like you really need to be passionate about it. And sometimes I think like it's actually easier to tap into that passion if you're not only passionate about, you know, really cool clothes, but there's something else, you know, like maybe it is sustainability, maybe it's inclusion, maybe it's like involving tech into your designs, something, so that when you're like stressed out of your mind and it's so hard, you can like just reel yourself back into like your why for why you do it, so that you'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great. And why is your mission of body liberation so important to you?
Well, you know, it's funny because it's something that's been important to me basically my whole life. But when you're young, you don't really, you know, you just have like morals and thoughts and values, but you don't really know where they came from, and you don't really know enough about the world to understand like how they tie into our greater system, you know? So when I was younger, I was just making clothes for everyone. You know, I was able to do a runway show when I was a senior in high school, and I just cast my friends, and my friends were all sizes, my friends were all ethnicities. I had a plus size model in my runway show, and I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't trying to make a statement or just, you know, it's just like, this is my friend and I'm going to make her a dress because I'm 17 and that's how I think about things, you know. But I think the more that you learn about the world and, you know, the systems of our society, the more you start thinking about, okay, this is like a very deep rooted problem that needs to be addressed a multitude of ways. And at the end of the day, I just think the concept of creating art, if you like consider your clothing to be art, and then deciding to limit who can participate in it, it just doesn't make sense at all. And then when you look at stats, you know, the majority of Americans are plus size. So like 67 to 72%, depending on where you're getting your stat from.
Right.
So this concept that like, then the reverse, the majority of stores, sometimes 70 to 80% of stores are stopping at a large or stopping at an extra large. Like those stores are looking at people or not looking at people and deciding like, I'm the biggest person that deserves fashion.
Yeah.
And that is just, it's obscene to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what is the stat? Is it like 17% of the market is actually plus size? Is that, am I saying that right?
Sold plus size?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it changes all the time, but
Yeah.
I did a talk during Sustainability Week last fall, and like according to the numbers of sales in 22 that were women apparel in general, and then plus size specific apparel, I think it was 19%.
Wow.
Was plus size.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's infuriating. And then when you talk about the sustainability angle of that, you know, like the fact of the matter is we're producing 150 billion garments a year.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous on its own. But we're also getting rid of a third of that within the first year that it's made.
Wow.
So it's just going in the trash. Now imagine if we made clothes for the right size people. And how many things we could avoid putting in the trash just simply by shifting our just shift the size range over.
Yeah.
And we can avoid so much waste.
Yeah, absolutely. When I worked at Ralph Lauren right around the time that you were launching this brand, and we had plus size portion of our business, and we were talking about it all the time, like this is growing, but the norm up until around that time was just taking the dumbest part of the product, the boringest part of the product, the plain white t-shirts, the turtlenecks, the v-neck sweaters, and making those in plus size too, and not giving them any of the fashion. And so there was this big push, you know, she wants the fashion too, and by the way, you know, she can wear an extra large like t-shirt that's just plain and easy. What she wants is a good fitting fashion garment or well-fitting fashion garment. So,
and that's still,
and yet not that much has
happening
changed.
now.
It's still only, you know, 17 to 19% of the market. It could be so much more if it was being done right.
Yeah,
So.
and what's really a big problem with that, in my opinion, right now is that, you know, unfortunately, we live in a society where societally we are fatphobic, right? And so that seeps into people. So if you're the CEO of a company and, you know, you've been beaten down by somebody who's finally like, listen, the numbers are here. You have to do it for the numbers, right? And they'll just kind of like dip their toe in it and be like, okay, we'll release this and this and this in these sizes, but we're gonna not carry them in the store. We're gonna put them in a different section on the website. We're not gonna hire a plus size influencer, blah, blah, blah. And then when it doesn't sell, they go, look, there's no market for it, right? But we have to think about the fact that like this huge group of the population has been actively excluded from capital F fashion for so long. Can you imagine the like wherewithal and the self courage you have to be like, no, I belong here? Like that takes a lot for someone to do, right? Like we should be doing everything we can to make those people feel included and safe.
Yeah.
Not to be like, you know, here's a crumb and you're lucky if you come get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is the hardest part about running your business?
Oh my God, that there's only one of me. There's just so much to do, and you know, there's only so many hours in the day, and I am only one person. It took me a really, really long time to figure out how to balance my life and run a business. Like how to still be a good friend and a good wife and daughter and everything, while still running a business, because it just takes up so much of your time.
Yeah.
So like you really have to make sure that you are carving out not just a schedule for your work, but also a schedule like for your life so that you don't miss it.
Yeah. And what's the best part?
Ugh, okay, so many things. I mean, the best part is like that clip from my documentary that I included here is the direct impact that it's had on people. The first woman that was talking, the black woman with the fro, she's become a very, very close friend of mine, and she actually came over my house on New Year's, and we were having a conversation about like, what's an impactful job that you've had that's not tied to your actual career, that's like changed, you know, what's happened for you, like the course of your life. And she was like, can it be something that like wasn't like a big reason that you know, or a big chunk of your money, right? Like it was just a side thing, and we were like, yeah, sure. And then she said it was this.
Aww.
And I was like, I totally did not see it coming at all. Like I really didn't.
Yeah.
And she was just like, you know, having somebody tell me that like I'm worthy and beautiful and like should be equal to everyone else, and then like put me on a platform and put a highlight on me, like it changed everything for me. And I just was like, that's the best part.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Is your company still just you, or are there more
So right
parties
now,
involved?
Right now, yes. I've also like pivoted it a little bit. So like, you know, that's the other thing about having a small business is you pivot all the time.
Yeah.
And like for all different reasons, right? So, you know, back in 2015, I think I mentioned there, I had a 3-month-long pop-up shop. And during that time, I did have more employees. So I had 2 design assistants who were making things with me. I had somebody who was doing PR, etc. right? And then like time shifts and things change, and that changes. And for a while, then it was just me again. And then for the past few years, I had 4 different assistants, but they were all remote, and they were all doing more of the in-house work. So they were doing newsletters, they were doing TikToks, they were doing Pinterest, they were writing blogs, you know, that kind of stuff, so that I could focus on the creative stuff.
Yeah.
And then just almost a year ago, I pivoted the company to be more education forward, while still just making custom pieces. So I'm not currently releasing whole collections and doing runway shows. I am focusing on hopefully changing the fashion education system as well, because that's really, in my opinion, like where it needs to start, while still making custom pieces for people. So right now I do a lot of like special occasion things and wedding looks for folks, which is super fun. And since being a teacher, as I mentioned before, how like just revitalizes your creativity. I just finally started kind of coming up with some really cool pieces that are unlike anything that I've done before for SmartGlamour, that will be like more special occasion, like high-end one-offs.
Wow.
Yeah, which
amazing.
is a huge pivot. So.
Yeah. And what's your lead time for people?
Well, back when it was, you know, this kind of stuff,
Easier, yeah.
again, it really varied, right? So when I first launched, I think I was like, it's a week. And then I was like, that's not possible. And it immediately went to like 3 weeks, which it stayed at 3 weeks for a very long time. And then sometimes some viral moment happens that you're not knowing is going to happen. And then you get flooded with orders, and you have to pause your site.
Yeah.
And then you have to catch up, and then you come back. You know what I mean? I had somebody unprompted that I never even knew about this person. They actually weren't even following me. They were doing a TikTok series of like rating inclusive companies.
Oh.
And somebody had suggested them to do me. And so they did, and since they hadn't heard of me, they were like really pleasantly surprised and shocked. And the video, they just keep getting more and more excited.
Oh my gosh.
And so that video went viral overnight, and they didn't even tag me, so I didn't even know what happened. I just like, saw all these subscribers on my site, and I was like, "What is this from?" And then somebody told me, and then you know I got like 100 orders in 2 days, and I was like, "Okay, we're gonna have to put a pause on this, for a moment while I catch back up."
Oh my gosh.
And then we'll press go.
Were you able to find someone to help you fill the orders in a situation like that?
I did not. We had a complicated living situation with a pet, so that wasn't an option. So I had to do it all myself. But yeah.
Oh no.
yeah. Life gets in the way.
Yes, for sure. Well, that's the beauty of owning your own company, is that your life is part of it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Have you sorry, you mentioned, you said a line before, and I'm not going to paraphrase it right,
Mhm.
but changing the course of fashion education.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could speak more about what you're trying to do there.
Yeah, you know, I mean, the thing about having a business specifically with SmartGlamour that is so message driven, so like something that I would always say in interviews is that it's person forward first before it is fashion forward. And when you have a message driven company, you can't just be like, here's a bunch of pretty clothes, buy them. You need to create content that is based on other things. You need to talk about your messaging. You need to educate your consumer. And so we do that a lot on our social media. Our Instagram specifically has like highlighted stories from years back. One story highlight that I do over and over is called Fashion Facts. There's 11 of them, if anyone's interested in checking them out, where I'm just constantly talking about the fashion industry and the reality of how things are made, the reality of marketing, the reality of representation, so on and so forth. And by doing that, it resonates with a lot of people. It resonates with a lot of shoppers who, A, don't know anything about the fashion industry, or B, have felt left out from the fashion industry. And those people, you know, they're talking to me live in my DMs and they're getting frustrated with companies who like don't seem to get it.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of explaining how, you know, fashion industry professionals come from the fashion education system, right? It's a pipeline. And if inclusion is not thoughtfully taught as part of fashion education, then you're going to end up with fashion industry professionals who don't know anything about it.
Right.
And it just, so like you really, as anything that's a systemic problem, you can't just like push one button and fix it.
So,
You
yeah.
have to attack it in many places and at many levels. And so, you know, I teach for continuing education, and one of my classes that I've actually created for continuing ed is called Inclusive Fashion Pattern Making, where first we learn about the reality of the U.S. consumer. We talk a lot about sizes, about size charts, about grading, all of that stuff. And then I teach my students how to change a pattern from one size to another, and they get to fit it on a plus size model who represents the average U.S. consumer, and then they get to make that same thing for them.
Wow. Cool. That sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Looking back on your journey, what do you think is the most important decision you've made in your career, and why?
Man, so many that I'm not sure which is going to be the most important, but I guess I'm going to have to go with quitting my corporate job.
Yeah.
Because none of this would have been possible if I had stayed there.
Yeah.
You know, it's really hard to do your own side artistic thing while you're at a 9 to 5, which most of the time is 9 to 6:30, 9 to 7. 8:30 to 8 kind of a situation. You just don't have the time or the emotional bandwidth. Like, I just want to come home and eat dinner and watch Netflix and go to bed. I don't want to be making a business, you know.
Right.
So leaving that job, which was stressful and not creative, which helped me emotionally, but then filling my life with freelance work, which completely changed my schedule, is what made this feasible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Who's the most interesting person you've met in your career?
Oh my goodness. Most interesting. Oh, that's so hard for me because I mean, so like, just by the way I've set up SmartGlamour, and that I feel like I didn't even do a good job of showing enough of our imagery. Please look it up if you're interested. I cast anyone and everyone, and it always becomes like I think I'm gonna have 20 models, and then I'm like, oh no, I want 24 people because everyone is so cool and I love everyone. And then I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna make 4 more looks because I would rather do that. I would rather include more people. So I mean, and my models are collectively, I think, the most interesting people I've met.
That's great. Kind of met all different walks of life through it.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
Did you kind of touched on this a little bit when you started off of the company, but have you ever had to lean on your network to move things forward? Whether in your previous corporate career or beyond.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting because you run a small business by yourself, but well, in this case you do. You don't always. I ran my small business by myself, but you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah.
You know, so like for instance, my husband was completely picking up the slack of like everything at our home.
Yeah.
You know, he's cooking the food, he's doing the dishes. If I like forgot to get a piece of fabric, I give him a swatch and he runs to the garment district. You know what I mean? Like it would have been impossible without him.
Yeah.
But then also just even, you know, my friends and my family, helping, supporting, being understanding, showing up to my events, sharing my posts on the internet, you know, things like that are super important. My models, as I just said a second ago, you know, the reason I have that model directory is because people come back to model with me over and over and over again. And so you see the same faces throughout my website because they believe in what I'm doing and support my mission. Like I wouldn't be able to do SmartGlamour without those people. Like it would just be impossible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. How do you feel like you keep yourself informed of the latest trends?
That's an interesting question. Because my quick answer is that I don't. Yeah, I have so many thoughts on trends as a concept that's like very layered. But I also believe that a really big part of sustainability is making things that you will want to wear for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think things that are too trendy, that are too like, oh, I'm just doing this because I see it everywhere and therefore it must be cool. That's something that you're maybe only going to wear once to a few times and then not again.
Yeah.
You know, so like SmartGlamour's design philosophy is really not following trends. It's about classic pieces that, you know, are stylish and fun, that come in like fun colors and fun prints.
Yeah.
But that you're going to be able to wear for a long time. So like, do I watch runway shows and like follow content and like look at red carpets? Yes. But I'm really not paying attention to like, ooh, is there a through line here that maybe I want to cut? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, those things are going to cycle in and out.
Yeah.
But like a classic wrap dress that fits you great, it's never going out of style.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you, because this now brings it back to where I was kind of going with my original lecture as I started to talk about sustainability in future weeks, is just the ins and outs that we saw throughout the last 100 years. And this is the first time in history that it has really been so dramatic, the shifts in the way that people dressed. And that before, you know, the Industrial Revolution, things were made custom to fit someone.
Yes, they were.
Or maybe not quite custom. It was hand-me-down, so it was passed on on and on, you know, for a long time and generations. There was a point in time where you would literally inherit clothes as, you know, part of your inheritance, and they were bestowed down in generations, and things lasted longer, and you could be worn for longer. But now we've gotten ourselves into this moment of, you know, new, something walks the runway and we want to be producing it and shipping it all over, and it's creating a lot of waste.
Oh my God, so much. I mean, fast.
Yeah.
Fashion, and it just keeps getting faster.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely wild. But I think, obviously, like the sustainability bit, I hope is obvious that like that is harmful. But I think what's also harmful is like the fit aspect of that, right? I think, a lot of people think or may not know the reality of size charts, and they think like, oh, this one brand is going to have the best size chart, which means they're going to have the best fit, and so everything is going to fit me and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, size charts were created to further along mass production. Like they're a chart, right? Like you have to have that so that you can just mass produce things, because you're just following a chart. You're just cutting a pattern and you're going. But bodies were not created off of size charts. So like no matter what you do with your size chart, there are going to be people that do not fit into it. So as a designer, it's about what do I do to solve that problem? And there's so many ways to go about it that, again, there's no like one little button that's gonna just fix it.
Yeah.
But what the biggest take home I think that I want people to have is to like really understand how that system works, so they're not blaming themselves. They're not blaming their bodies. They're not going, you know, what is wrong with my body that it doesn't fit in these clothes? No. Like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
It's that you're trying to fit into a system that was not made for you.
It's a box. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I like that. what do you, I don't know if this, maybe you have already answered this, but what do you feel like is the greatest challenge that's facing our industry today?
Oh, I think it's overproduction and overproduction for the wrong people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, I was at a sustainability talk a few months ago that was put on by like a women's group, and they asked about overproduction like from the beginning and why does it happen, and everyone had very different answers, which were all super interesting to me. A lot of it was a little like blamey on the consumer, where I was like, I don't know, like we're the ones that are making too much, so like I don't know if I would put it there. I mean, I know that like people overshop and people participate in fast fashion, you know what I mean? But like, if we weren't creating it, they couldn't participate in it. Right. So like we have to take some of the blame there. Yeah. But somebody gave a quote or a stat that when they worked more in corporate fashion, which they don't anymore, their goal was to sell 60% of what they were making. That was their goal. They were hoping to sell 60% of it. So like, that means that a lot of times that's not what happens. So like, just imagine how much just from that one company, which was a big brand, is getting thrown away. Yeah. It's like we need to raise our standards here. Right. And we need to think more critically about what we're producing and why we're producing it and how much we're producing. Right. And like raise that goal of sell-through. Yeah. Yeah. Because that was a scary step.
Yeah, that is scary. Yeah. And if they got more towards 100%, they could probably make the same amount of money and
right, exactly, right. If you're selling everything that you're making, you would make more because you wouldn't be wasting all that money on production that's not getting sold, and then you either have to discount or resell or burn.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sad. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so as a class, at the beginning of the semester, on the first day, we developed four capstone questions, actually, because we had too many to choose from. So we have 4 capstone questions that we're asking all of our guests every week. And the first is, what qualities do you look for when hiring, or when you have hired, and any tips to make one's resume or lookbook stand out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I will go more off of like my most recent round of hiring, because I feel like the way that you apply for jobs changes so often nowadays. So my most recent batch of hiring, I found everyone through LinkedIn, first of all. I posted a job and I waited for people to apply for that job. I did like pay to promote it, but a very small amount. And I like got inundated with way too many applications. Wow. Anyway. But I asked for like very specific instructions for them to follow, or I gave very specific instructions for them to follow in the listing, so that anyone who didn't follow those instructions, I could remove immediately. So like my first tip is to always fully read the whole listing and submit the way they've asked you to submit, right? Because if you submit another way, or you forget something, or etc., it just kind of shows that you don't have maybe the attention to detail that someone is looking for. Yeah. Yeah, so like that's a big one.
And I want to just say thank you for that, because as you all probably remember from my first day of class, I said a lot of our assignments are about following directions. Like, that's basically it. So, and there's a reason for that, because it matters in the industry and it follows you.
Oh, because it's so important. And it's like, if you're going to become my employee and I'm going to give you tasks, like I want you to follow my instructions. So if you can't follow the application instructions, I'm not really going to trust you to follow the job instructions. Yeah. And then I would say like the next thing, it's not even really about like the creative work that you're showing me, but also it's really just like in your communication, like in your emailing, in your messaging, like just be professional, like write full sentences. I know this sounds ridiculous, but like
you'd be surprised.
Yes, you would be surprised, like put an intro, put a closing, you know what I mean? Like those things alone, following instructions and being professional will like put you, I swear, in the top 5% of candidates. So, and then I feel like when you do the interview, if you get to the interview stage, I would say do research on the company that you're going to hire to interview with, right? Obviously, I hope that you do that before you apply, so that you decide like, oh, this is a company I really want to work for. But once you get an interview, like really do it. You know what I mean? Like if somebody shows up to an interview and I feel like they actually know what's going on with Smart Glamour and they're excited about it, they're like, this message resonates with me because of ABC. I'm like, ooh, this person's getting a star next to their name.
Yeah.
You know? So
Yeah.
like, be interested.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's awesome. Okay. So you've talked a little bit about this in your answers, but what ways are you currently managing your work-life balance?
So much better than I used to. I'm so proud of myself. It's funny. I'm giving myself way more days off. I used to have no days off, basically, and I would give myself like chunks of time off, and now I give myself whole days off. Which you really need, you know. And
Yeah.
it's like sometimes my husband will be like, "Oh, what do you have tomorrow?" And I'm like, "Nothing." And he's like, "Good for you. Keep that nothing.
Yeah.
Do nothing." So like, I think especially nowadays, I don't know how this like trend went on about how like young people these days don't want to work and they don't want to do anything. That's nonsense. It's not true. You just don't want to work for companies that are exploiting you and exploiting others. You want to like be creative and feel fulfilled. But like the thing about being creative and feeling fulfilled with what you're doing is then you run the risk of like never stopping.
It's all consuming.
Yes, it's all consuming. So like you definitely have to remember to give yourself breaks and give yourself time and like just be a person, go outside, see your family, you know,
Yeah.
etc. Go to a museum.
I like that. How do you maintain passion for what you do?
See, I feel like that ties back into my like original overarching advice is like my passion for being inclusive to people is not something that I have to maintain. Like it doesn't go away like ever. Like I'm constantly thinking about it. I'm obsessing over it. I'm talking about it all the time. If I even just like see a list of designers, sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna see what sizes they offer, and I start Googling, then get mad about it, and being like, look at this, they don't fit clothes for the average person, because it's just it's the thing that keeps me up at night. So like it's not something that I have to maintain.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really the key.
drive. Yeah.
Is like to find your thing like that and tailor your work or your life around it so that you don't have to maintain that part.
Like that. And our last question is, what is a moment of failure in your journey and how did you recover from it?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I will go with, and it wasn't a like tiny moment, it was like a lot of moments all together, where in 2017, I was trying to do a really big fundraise so that I could completely shift the way that I produced things and the way that I ran the company. I wanted to be able to like hire a team because I was doing so much work by myself and it wasn't super viable. And so I started trying to fundraise. I started like going to pitch events and trying to send cold call emails to like capital investors and all of this stuff. And I basically just hit like brick wall after brick wall. At that time, I do think I see like a slight shift happening, but at that time, people were really not interested in investing in physical products and especially not fashion and especially not sustainable fashion. You know, like investors want the biggest return as quick as possible.
Yeah.
So being like, well, I make everything small batch and customized and excessively priced is like not super interesting
Yeah.
to people who are just looking to like make a bunch of money off of you. And so yeah, I tried every which way. I did actually get like kind of far in talking to specifically a venture group that like focuses on social businesses, but then they were like, oh, we have another fashion brand, so we can't invest in you because it's competition.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. So basically I had to just completely pivot because like I had to keep on, but like, okay, this plan that I thought was gonna happen is clearly not happening. Maybe it would happen in the future, but it's not happening now. So if that's not happening, I need to find a way to make this more sustainable. And I had to just get like really creative with solutions. And like one very quick example of an actual tangible solution I did was, as I mentioned, I did all these inclusive runway shows. I paid for them all myself, and that's expensive, especially in New York City. So I pivoted and I made all of my runway shows from that point on collaborative pop-up events. So I reached out to small business owners who either produce sustainably, make handmade things, etc., or if they do resell other things, they are ethically produced things, and gave them a very low fee to come table. I didn't take percentages of their sales, they just had a flat fee to table, and their collective flat fee to table paid for the venue space
Wow,
instead of coming out of my pocket.
that's amazing.
And it was cool because it
Creative.
like creates community as
Yeah.
well, you know, and people get to meet each other, and that's always fun.
Yeah,
But it also just took a big financial weight off of my back.
yeah. Oh, that's great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's all of my questions.
Okay.
I'm sure there's some out here. Yes, Mr. Hill.
Hi, nice to meet you. I like really agree with everything you said, and if you need a volunteer, I'm free because I quit my job at Tiffany ago.
Okay, thank you so much.
At Tiffany?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like, they don't care about their clients or their employees. They care about the KPI.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's stupid. It's not worth it.
It's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. I wish I was surprised. I just also want to stress on everyone that, like, while sometimes it can feel hard to find, like, there are people who care about their employees and also about making money. Like, you know, I have had employees, I cared about them, I paid them fairly. You know, I had one who had an emergency, and like the entire SmartGlamour community rallied around and fundraised for her. So I offered like basically surprise items, and people purchased them, and all of that, the money went to her to help her out in that tough time. So like those companies do exist. As far as am I looking for a volunteer? Not currently. What I would say is just follow us, because if I ever am, I'll post it all across all of our social media.
Thank you.
Of course.
Also, I'm sorry, I just have one more. Before you came to, where are you from, like originally, before college?
I'm from Newburgh, New York. So it's about an hour and a half north. It's by like Beacon, Poughkeepsie, New Paltz.
You know Mount Vernon?
Yeah, Mount Vernon is much closer. Newburgh is further up.
That's where I'm from.
Oh, okay. Cool.
That's cool.
How do you stay competitive? And I feel like now a lot of brands are coming out with more body inclusive lines and brands. How do you stay competitive with that? Or do you like work with them? Is that something that you find being a problem with your brand message?
That's a good question. Well, first I would say that when it comes to like other inclusive brands, my personal prerogative is like I want more of them. So I don't really see them as direct competition, because the fact of the matter is, as we stated before, there's not enough companies being inclusive. So I want as many as possible. And especially small businesses, like small businesses are inclusive. I share their stuff, because like I can't physically make clothes for everyone in the world. So I need more people who care about inclusion and who care about sustainability, not less. That being said, the way to stand out is just to be authentically yourself, and to like truly care about what you're saying, and to be transparent, and to be really clear with your values. I think something that comes across really well in our content is that I'm very authentic and I'm very transparent, and that people find that relatable and uplifting and empowering, and so they stay with me. So I feel like if you create connection with your customers and with your followers, they will stay with you, and they'll shop other places, and that's okay.
Yes, right here.
Nice to meet you. I wanted to ask, you mentioned that you did collections before.
Yes.
And now you're doing more custom, special occasions.
Yep.
So how has your pricing strategy changed in them?
That's a really good question. So yes, I've produced 50 collections, not all of the same size. Like, so I would always do like a spring and a fall that were really big, and then I would do smaller things. So like a swimwear, a special occasion, etc. Sometimes I would just re-up a style in like new prints or new colors, and kind of like re-promote best-selling items and things like that. But my pricing structure, first of all, is transparent. It's directly on our website. You can just look it up and see exactly how we come to our prices. Anytime I change my prices, I also am very upfront about that with my customers, and I explain why and how. of all of it, right? Because I don't think it's necessary to hide that information from people. So you have to calculate your fabric cost, your labor cost, your overhead, add it all together, and then you have to multiply it for profit, right? So the first thing is that I'm direct to consumer, and I always will be, and I never will be anything else. So I don't have to factor in like the price of like selling that to a wholesaler who then is going to resell it, right? Because if you do omni-channel, which means you sell yourself, but then you also, other people sell your things for you, like a boutique, etc. You have to get your direct to consumer price similar to that price, because they have to be able to make money. But if you are selling your things at 50% the cost, why would anyone buy it from them? They're just gonna buy it from you, right? So I don't do any secondary selling. It's only through me. And the big part of that is because I want to be as accessible as possible in price. Then the second thing is like, as far as what percent you multiply by as your profit, it's up to you, right? And I think that we all have our own personal feelings around money and capitalism and all of that jazz. So I personally keep that lower. And that means that I have to make a lot of other decisions that tie into that. So like I have to design very specifically so that I can keep things affordable. I have to not do massive blowout sales because I don't have sales built into my pricing structure. So like you kind of have to think about your pricing as it relates to everything else you do. And everything has to like work together. That being said, custom things are totally a one-off conversation. And I think about how long is it going to take me to make this garment? How much is the fabric going to be? And then also, like, to be quite honest, as I'm the one making it, like, how much do I want to get paid to make this? Like, how much is my labor and time worth to make this garment? And then I come up with a very, like, individual proposal for that person, and they either accept it or they don't. Yeah.
In the back.
How did you market yourself as a freelancer? Where did you put your job?
That's a good question. So this was so long ago that like I never even really considered having like an online presence and portfolio for my freelance work. If I was doing that nowadays, I absolutely would. Like I would suggest having like some kind of online portfolio of your work, some kind of online presence so that people can look you up. But back then that just wasn't really something that came into my mind or that I felt like I needed. And then I would just apply to jobs. So I was constantly looking on like Craigslist, style careers. If LinkedIn was really a thing back then, I would have looked on LinkedIn. And I was like responding to people's needs more than like people were just stumbling upon me. Yeah.
A good way to like, the answer to your question, you can start with your friends. Just like tell your friends, check in with your friends. Tell them what you're thinking. Ask them what they think about that. That's a good way to market.
I feel like your network is the best way to find things for sure. But which is why I always recommend using LinkedIn to the best of your ability. Like LinkedIn every single person that you have class with. Mm-hmm. LinkedIn every professor that you have a connection with, because maybe you don't need them today, but you just never know what's going to come down the pike, and LinkedIn keeps you kind of connected. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
How much do you figure out how to pay yourself as a small business owner? Because I feel like that you don't want to be like wrongly profiting off of people, but you have to live.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, how do you figure that out as somebody who makes everything yourself?
I mean, it's just a really personal decision, you know? Also, like, for a long time, I undervalued myself. Mm-hmm. And I think it was because of that. Like, because, like, I wanted people to be able to afford it. And it's almost like I was like, I'm just lucky to be able to do this. You know what I mean? Which is true. Like at the end of the day, if you can use your creativity and, like, make art and live, you are very lucky to be able to do that. There's like lots of people who can't. So like that I think is important. But I think you just have to think about like what is realistic for the market around you. What are other people being paid for the work that you do? And what is your lifestyle? You know what I mean? Like, what is your rent? How much does it pay for, like, how much does it cost for you to live? And then, like, not just live, but enjoy your life, you know? And just, again, always just be realistic, be clear, be transparent, be straightforward. You know, one of the times I increased my prices, I actually put up a whole story on Instagram talking about, like, you know, this is how long it takes me to make this dress, blah, blah, blah. And also talking about, like, do you think that this is specialized labor? Like, can you make a pattern? Can you sew a dress? How long do you think it took me to do this? How long do you think it took me just to put the zipper in? Like, I really want people who are shopping to think more critically about their purchases and think about the people that are making their clothes. Because even when you buy clothes for $5 from Shein, a human being made them, right? So, like, I want people to appreciate and value my labor and understand why a simple dress might cost $75, which for a sustainable dress is very low.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I really want people to stay with me on that and to understand and to value my work.
I wanted to ask you, like, how and when did you know that you wanted to open your own brand rather than just working under a sustainable brand?
That's a really good question. So also, I feel like when I was in college, no one was talking about sustainability. If they were in very small pockets. It was really not a topic like it is now. So trying to find a sustainable brand literally was not on my radar. I didn't even understand that was a possibility. And then, like, as far as just in general, deciding to work for myself instead of working for someone else, truly just came through trying to work for someone else and being really disappointed with how people are treated, and me included, like me as an employee, but also, you know, the people that were contracting to make clothes and our customers. Like, I didn't want to participate in that. And so that's why I switched to freelance. And then when it came to making and selling my own things, I think as in my bio, it says that, like, I realized I could help people with clothes, and that's really why I started it, right? For me personally, it just never seemed like enough of a reason to just make a pretty dress. Like, I can just make myself a pretty dress. Like, it's so much more work goes into making it a business that, like, it wasn't until I was like, wait, fashion doesn't have to be like this, and maybe I can fix it, that I was like, okay, now I'll sell clothes. You know, like, I really needed the message behind it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Hi. This is not a question, actually. This is a comment, I would say.
Okay.
Recently, I did read an article which was called "Your Clothes Were Never Meant to Fit You."
Yeah.
It was from New York Times.
Yep.
And your brand completely addresses all the issues that were mentioned in that article, like, directly. It just got me thinking that if there were more brands like this, I don't think there would be articles or people that feel that way, you know.
Thank you.
So, kudos to that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, so much of buying and marketing in this world, not just in fashion, just in general, is they're really trying to feed off of people's impulses and also their insecurities. They're trying to say, look at how cool this shiny new thing will make you feel, so you need to buy it, you know? And I've just always come from a place with my company that I don't think that's necessary. I think if you make people feel supported and seen and you give them information, they will also buy from you. So, like, I think a lot of small businesses think along that line, right? And that's why I think Shopping Small is so special. But I do agree that specifically within the fashion industry, we need a huge, huge change to, instead of running off of pretension and exclusion, we need to run off of inclusion and being welcoming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know we touched on this like a little bit, but do you think that a lot of the inclusion and like that kind of thing that's going on in the industry right now, at like the big designer level, do you think a lot of that is performative, or do you see it as genuine? Like, because like I feel like a lot of the times I feel like it can be kind of like disingenuous.
It's like greenwashing, but what do we call it?
There needs to be a word for it.
Fatwashing.
Yeah, maybe. I'm sure you can tell by the facial expression that I could not hide that, yes, I think a lot of it is very disingenuous. I think a lot of brands see it as a PR marketing move, and they will maybe make like a one-off thing for a person with influence to put in an ad, but then can you actually buy that thing? Does it actually come in that size? Did they actually make it in the correct size for that person? Because let's be honest, photo shoots are very heavily edited and clipped, and you never see a 360 view of people. You see them, you know what I mean? And also I think that, I mean, I'm a very hypercritical person when it comes to inclusion, as if you haven't been able to tell. And even the companies that we think of, the high-end companies who are doing a better job at it, I don't think anyone's doing a good enough job. No one. And I think that because, when I'm talking about like high-end designers, nobody is. I think that we have, as humans, society, have such a warped idea of what bodies look like and what sizes look like. And so, to be quite honest, high-end designers will send 4 models down the runway who are my size. And everyone will go, oh my goodness, you are inclusive. And I'm like, no. It's only because that person is standing next to somebody who's a 00.
Yeah.
That you're looking at the person who's a 14 and thinking, oh, this is inclusion. Meanwhile, the average woman in America's waist is 38.5 inches wide. And that was 5 years ago. So making something in a 14 and clapping for yourself it's not where it's at.
I was just wondering if you have a favorite brand that is doing a good job of being inclusive.
They're all going to be small businesses. They're not designer brands. There's a company based out of Canada called Connolly Goods. She does a great job. There's a small business that just started in Chicago that I actually did tech design for called Joy Toast. That is doing a great job. In LA, there is a small business that's focused on upcycling and recycling called the Plus Bus. They do a great job. Yeah, it's small businesses. Those are the people who I think are doing it right.
Okay. Any other questions out there?
There's one in the back too.
Oh, sorry.
As a person that once learned musical is now teaching here, do you think that the way they teach, specifically materials and construction, should change? Students should be able to buy a pattern in their specific size and learn to make it in their size instead of just a size 4?
Yeah. I'm going to be editing my pattern to fit me. So something I have been considering, students who are in my class, is, and I haven't figured this out yet, so don't jump on being too excited. And this would be something that I would not be paid to do, but I think it's that important, is doing some kind of workshop that you're welcome to attend if you want, to help you edit your pattern so that it will fit you. Because I actually, in preparation for this class, I was being mentored by another professor who's taught this class for a long time, and we talked about that. We talked about how it's kind of wild that y'all are just buying a pattern of a specific size, and it doesn't matter if that's a size that means anything to you. And then we're spending all this time making these garments that you're putting a lot of your work into, and if you can't wear it or you don't know somebody that it fits, what are you gonna do with it? And all the stuff I made while I was a student here, I didn't do anything with. It just sat in my closet. And not only is that not sustainable, but it's also not very fun. So stay tuned.
I was just gonna say, you remind me of my friend XO.
Oh.
You know what I'm talking about? She's FBM. She's from Texas, and she makes prom dresses. Prom season, and she makes dresses, and she doesn't use patterns. Whenever she needs, when she's making a dress, she would just show up at my door and be like, "Can you try this on?" And I'm like, "This isn't my size." She would just use my body to just make the size approximate to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
because like she's not in Dallas anymore. So she asked me because she knows I'm a similar size to the client, so that when the client gets the product, it's close and it's always the right size. I'm like, oh wow, like you remind me of her.
Well, when you learn how to make clothes, like as we do here, you don't use patterns, you make your own pattern. So like for my company, I have patterns of all different sizes, but then because my clothes are customizable, I take that pattern and then I customize it as I'm working. And it's just a process that I came up with on my own. But then my husband actually was working at an event at a like high-end bespoke tailoring place, and he was sending me pictures because they allowed him. But he was sending me pictures of like their process, and they literally do the same thing. So they like lay down slopers and they adjust as they go. So that's also how I make clothes.
Yeah, because I was telling her like, girl, like you should be fashion designer. She's like, I don't want to be fashion designer. Like, I just do this because like I want to make money to live here. And she like, you know, I was telling her, you could work at a bridal shop, like what are you doing? She's like, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else, but like, because I know how to make clothes, that's how I make money. That's what I'm using to do what I really want to do. And I feel like I keep, all of my friends, we all have that same narrative, and I think that's what's really important. Like, what are you trying to say? Like, who do you, I don't know, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, who do you want to be? Okay, let me take here, because you've been asked here.
Enjoyed all of this. I actually would love to connect with you after this about the patterning workshop. I'm the senator for fashion design for student government.
Oh.
So this is kind of something that we've been working on, is more like inclusivity, specifically with Suku.
Yes, on your chair.
Yeah, we've been working together since she started, and even last semester I was working with the former chair about like dress forms and everything.
Yes.
I think she just told me we got a whole bunch of new plus size forms from.
We did.
I want to say up to 22 is what she said.
I saw one in bubble wrap. I'm waiting for them to get unwrapped. I'm waiting to see what the biggest one is. I'm waiting to see where they go.
She said 22.
Okay, I hope so. But the other thing about dress forms is like, the size is not always exactly correspond to clothing sizes.
Exactly, but like for the materials and construction, that was what I thought when I took the class so long ago. I was like, why am I making like these straight size? I was like just trying. I have like a bunch of cousins. So I was like, try this on. Does this fit you? Because like it's like a very, for those who taking materials and construction, it's a very basic silhouette. It's meant to teach you how to make stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But like, it's not the most interesting garment in the world. So I'm just like, I'm not gonna keep this for my portfolio.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm also a teacher for continuing education, and I teach the Sew Like a Pro 1 and 2, and it's not part of the syllabus, but in Sew Like a Pro 1, we make a pair of just simple pull-on elastic waist pants, and I teach them how to alter their patterns, because I think it's important. Yeah. So yeah, happy to chat.
Other hands out there. Let's go with a few and then you.
I wanted to ask you that, do you think you would want to expand your small business? And then do you think it would be a challenge to expand the business and keep the sustainability as a factor in that place?
Good question. So currently, no. That is what I wanted to do at a time. And as I was saying, like, didn't work out at that time. So I pivoted. Right now, I'm really focusing on education and continuing to make custom pieces for people, because that does really bring me joy. But I also just need to remember to take care of myself, and I also need to want to focus on teaching, because I do think it's really important, and I want to be able to make those changes at that level. But as far as like, if it were to grow, would I be able to keep it sustainable? In my opinion, yes, I would, because I would grow in a way that factors sustainability in. I think that sometimes when we hear growth of businesses, it jumps to, oh, you're getting millions of dollars in funding and you just blow up and you just change everything about the way that you did it. And what happens a lot of times with especially fashion businesses who do that is they grow too fast. And then you're just in this game of, honestly, kind of like politics. We're just like constantly fundraising, because you just have to keep paying back investors. So that's really not the route that I would take. I wasn't trying to raise that much money in the scheme of business fundraising. And it was just to, like start with a bigger studio space that was also a store in the front that I could also maybe host classes in, and then like see where it goes from there. But like have a small team, scale production, scale our social media growth, etc. Right? And then like if that model works and continues to grow, then you can repeat that model, but always keeping it feeling smaller, feeling inclusive, or being inclusive and being sustainable, because I'm not attempting to follow somebody else's business model just because, if that business model does not align with my company's values. Yeah. Did you still have a question? Or not?
So on? Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna ask what you think about the sustainable materials specifically, like things that are biodegradable.
Ooh, yeah.
Because I feel like on one side of sustainability, it's making pieces that you're not gonna get rid of and lasting a long time, but also maybe something that's biodegradable that if you do want to rotate your closet, something that won't just like never biodegrade and it's made out of plastic.
So, in my opinion, there's so many different ways for companies to go at sustainability, and the way that you decide to do it has to rely on everything else that's going on with your business, right? Like not everything is going to work for you. And because accessible pricing is such a big part of my business, paying for very, very expensive, like tech-based, organic, reusable, recycled things, it's just like my prices would have to like double, triple, quadruple, right? So instead, what I do is I don't ever create fabric. I only use fabric that already exists, and like 90% of it is dead stock. So like the world is full of fabric and resources, and we've got to use it. If it doesn't get used, it's just gonna go into the same landfill as the clothes are gonna go, right? So like I'm specifically shop from small businesses who those small business fabric stores are buying dead stock and buying discount fabric that would have been thrown away, so that it can be used. And then I also, again, I make that clear. I explain that process to my customers. And also a fun part of that is like, especially when you're shopping small, it's like, especially if I get like a print, right? I don't design the prints, I buy them as they are, they're dead stock, but there's only a limited amount. So it's like, I can make 20 dresses out of this one specific floral, and then it's gone and it's not gonna come back. So like, there is like a kind of like fun aspect of that like, you're gonna have something special, you're gonna have something that like not everyone could possibly be walking around with, and it ties into sustainability. And before, when I was mentioning that we raise money for one of my employees by selling surprises, so that's another aspect of my sustainability, is we have a product called SmartGlamour Surprise, where somebody, it's $20, and you pick either a clothing item or a bralette. You tell me your size, you tell me any customizations you need, and you tell me like a color preference, like light, dark, bright, and then I make you something. So it's using up extra fabric that I maybe would have thrown out, especially bralettes, because they take such tiny little pieces. I could make 1,000,000 bralettes and never buy a new fabric, So it's just like coming up with creative solutions to further your company's sustainability that are not always expensive, fancy fabrics.
I think we probably only have time for one more question.
I think somewhere over there had their hand up. I have these two. Ooh.
I was gonna ask, considering that you're both a professor and a small business owner, do you have any like time management tips or anything?
I mean, my number one tip, which is gonna sound very simple and remedial, is just to like have a calendar that everything is on, so that like you're very clear of what you're supposed to be doing when, and it's organized. And then including like, if I want a day off where I don't want anybody to book anything with me, like I mark that day off. So then it's in my calendar and that's it, And then I'm really big on to-do lists. I'm just a person who likes lists in general and stats, and like that's how my brain works, but I make to-do lists and I put them in order of like small things that need to be done now, bigger things that need to be done soon, and then like things that I would like to do but are not urgent. And I like literally check them off as I go.
That's a good strat.
My question is more towards pricing only.
Sure.
It's related to the fact that all the big designers and clothes, And coming to the technicalities, there's a difference of fabric usage in everything. So how do you would price the same dress for different sizes, but keeping in mind the inclusivity and fairness?
I love that question so much, and I'm so glad you asked, especially because a lot of companies try to use that as a reason to not make bigger sizes or to charge plus size people more, which I don't ever do. So my company's size chart is extra small to 15X and beyond. The and beyond is because you can customize anything, so it doesn't matter if you're bigger or smaller or between, whatever, right? But I simply will never charge somebody who's buying a 15X more than an extra small. And I don't care that it costs more because it's more fabric, right? Now, the main section of that is I don't do my costing off of a size 6. I do my costing off of a 2, 3X because that is the average size person. That is the majority of people, and that's the majority of my customers.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, that is my chunk of money coming in and products coming out. And the other things kind of weigh themselves out, right? Because at the end of the day, as much as fashion world wants to tell you that there's a million people who wear extra small hanging out in this world, there are not, okay? So the amount of times that I make an extra small and the amount of times I make a 15X, they balance each other. And even when they don't, and this math actually exists in a saved Instagram highlight. If anyone wants to check it out, I'm constantly sharing actual stats and numbers. You're welcome to look it up on our Instagram. And I have a whole slide specifically about this where I go into actually the cost of the fabric difference between a small size, a middle of my chart size, and a larger size. And it's like $1. And like $1 to a very big company, they will never spend. They are like removing seams to save a penny. But as a small business, I will spend an extra $1 all day, every day to make sure that people are included.
Great note to end on. Great. Thanks to all of you who are here for the first time, and to my students who are here all the time. I'll see you all next week. 2 weeks. We're off next week, but 2 weeks we'll be back in the same space. Have a good one.
Like sticking to the chair.
I know. I feel like it's particularly hot today, but maybe it's my wool dress.
Oh, I mean, just